Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the fifth and, yes, final installment of our Chapter 10 lecture series. This section is entitled The Bank War and After. The focus question for this section is, how did the bank war influence the economy and party competition? The second bank of the United States represented both the hopes and the anxieties over the market revolution, depending on which side of the political spectrum one leaned towards at the time. Democrats came out against the bank strongly. Banks, according to Democrats, exploited the labor of others to generate profits for private investors. Banks overissued paper currency, which spurred inflation and reduced the buying power of wage earners. Now, at this time, the head of the Second National Bank of the United States was a man named Joseph Biddle, who was a vestige of that old Federalist ideology. And in 1832, he urged Congress to renew the bank's charter for another 20 years. Jackson, for his part, vetoed the bill, the renewal of the bank's charter. And his veto resonated with much of the public, especially his Democratic base. And even more importantly, this instance was the first time a president had actually used the power of the veto granted to that office by the Constitution, which greatly enhanced the power of the presidency, something that also seemed to fly in the face of Jackson's overarching political philosophy of limited government. Jackson ended up taking federal money out of the Bank of the United States and put it into various pet banks at the state level. And the choice of these pet banks reflected the same sort of ethos of the spoil system. It all depended on who was in charge of these banks and what their political affiliation was and things of that nature. This put economic power in the hands of state banks and deregulated the U.S. financial system at the time. State banks began printing more and more money to finance economic development in their states, and as a result, inflation increased, real wages, the buying power of those wages declined, and speculation ran rampant throughout the economy. This lack of centralized economic direction, rampant inflation, and rampant speculation led to economic collapse by 1837. The devaluing of paper currency led to the federal government to demand payment of taxes and loans in hard specie, gold and silver. Simultaneously, British banks demanded the same. A lot of American money and business was tied up in British banks, as Britain was still our primary trading partner at the time. Corollary to that, a recession in Britain led to a drop in demand of American cotton. All of these things coalesced at the same time to lead to this economic collapse. Businesses failed, unemployment skyrocketed, farmers lost their lands, states defaulted on their debts, and the depression that resulted lasted from 1837 all the way to 1843. The unintended consequence of the elimination of the Bank of the United States from control of the American economy and the American financial system. Martin Van Buren, the man behind the formation and the advancement of the Democratic Party under Jackson, was hand-selected by Jackson to succeed him, and he was elected president in 1836. Van Buren pulled money from those state banks and put it in a new national treasury, hoping to pull back this economic depression. However, the national treasury sat on those federal funds and did not allow them to be used for investment. This policy split the Democratic Party. Business-oriented Democrats who greatly desired federal funds to promote investment shifted to the Whigs, while the agrarian wing, those old Jeffersonians, rallied behind Van Buren. The continuing economic depression, the unresolved bank issue, and the split in the Democratic Party over Van Buren's policies weakened the Democrats in the 1840 election. The Whigs, for their part, nominated the war hero William Henry Harrison, who had defeated Tecumseh's forces, that pan-Indian alliance during the War of 1812 at the famous Battle of Tippecanoe. And they advertised Harrison as the champion of the common man. The Whigs essentially stole their entire playbook from Jackson's successful 1828 campaign by nominating a war hero and couching him in the terms of the common man, which was ironic considering that Harrison was of old aristocratic stock and nowhere near what a common man actually was. Well, Harrison did not last long in office. He actually died only a few months into his first term, and his vice president, John Tyler, a Democrat, took office. Now, it was somewhat common at this time for a candidate for president to select a candidate from the other party as his vice presidential running mate in hopes of broadening the ticket's appeal across party lines. But once in office, John Tyler very much showed his Democratic stripes and vetoed most of the Whig legislative initiatives at the time. And essentially, Tyler and Congress ended up gridlocked. The entire government was gridlocked for most of Tyler's presidency, and very little was accomplished during Tyler's term in office. Oh, that's a wrap, folks. That ends the final section of our Chapter 10 lecture series. As always, I hope you learned a lot. Study hard, and I'll see you soon.